Denise Akoto, step away from the workstation and keep your hands visible.
What's happening?
Denise Akoto controlled who got off the street and into a home. For years, nobody checked how she was making those decisions. They're about to find out.
We're investigating housing placements approved through your office.
I manage hundreds of applications every year.
She would not get the chance to explain. Within 48 hours, investigators from the state office of the Inspector General would seize her work laptop, the paper waiting list binders stacked in the cabinet behind her desk, and 3 years of bank statements showing cash deposits that lined up, almost to the day, with names that vaulted years of queue. 43 apartments sold, 81 families bumped further back into a line that already moved in years, not months. $684,000 in cash, traced through her personal checking account, a safe deposit box at a credit union 2 towns over, and a remodeled kitchen no municipal salary could explain. Quick question before we go further. Have you ever been on a waiting list for something that mattered? An apartment, a transplant, a spot in a program, and trusted that the order on that list was honest? Drop a comment and tell me what you waited for. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the kind of case this channel exists for. We follow these stories all the way through the file. Denise Akoto was born in 1976 in a row house on Pulaski Avenue in the east end of Riverton, Maryland, a port city of about 140,000 people, anchored by a Chesapeake Fed shipyard that had been losing jobs since the year she started school. Her father, Kofi Akoto, had arrived in the United States from Kumasi, Ghana in 1971 on a student visa, finished a 2-year accounting certificate at a community college outside Baltimore, and taken a bookkeeper position at a freight forwarder that paid him by the hour and gave him no benefits for the first 6 years. Her mother, Adwoa, cleaned offices for a janitorial contractor that held the overnight contract on 3 banks downtown. The family was not poor in the way her parents had been poor in Ghana. They were poor in the way a working family in a shrinking American port city was poor in 1981, which meant rent always paid, lights always on, and never, under any circumstances, a missed payment on the small Aetna life insurance policy her father had taken out the year his first child was born. They lived in a Section 8 voucher unit until Denise was 9. Her mother kept the recertification letters in a manila folder under the kitchen telephone. Every February, Adwoa Akoto carried that folder onto the public bus, transferred twice, and walked the last 6 blocks to the Riverton Housing Authority office on Custis Street to renew the paperwork. Denise went with her 3 years in a row. She remembered the smell of the waiting room, photocopy toner, and pine cleaner, and the way the woman behind the plexiglass would call names off a clipboard that never seemed to move. She graduated from Riverton South High School in 1994 with a B- average, a perfect attendance ribbon for her senior year, and a part-time job at a Rite Aid on Charles Street, where she had worked the cosmetics aisle for $11.25 an hour since she was 16. Her guidance counselor wrote on her file that she was organized, polite, mature for her age, slow to volunteer, but reliable once enlisted. She enrolled at Coppin State University on a partial need-based grant, lived at home, took the commuter bus an hour each way, and finished a bachelor's in social work in May of 1999. Her first job out of college was case aide at the Riverton Department of Social Services, food stamp recertifications, $26,400 a year, no overtime. She stayed 3 years. Her annual reviews used phrases that would follow her for the rest of her career. Thorough, discreet, manages a heavy caseload without complaint, comfortable with detail-oriented paperwork. Her direct supervisor wrote in 2001 that Denise had an unusual ability to remember the specific circumstances of individual clients across long gaps of time, which clients appreciated and which colleagues benefited from. In 2003, she moved laterally into the Riverton Housing Authority as a tenant services specialist, starting salary $31,800. She married Marcus Bell, a long-haul trucker for an interstate carrier, in the autumn of 2004 at a small ceremony at the West African Cultural Center on Broad Street. Their daughter, Abena, was born in December of 2006. Marcus's job kept him on the road 18 days out of every 28. Denise raised the child mostly alone, with help from her mother on weekday evenings. She was promoted to waitlist coordinator in 2009, to senior waitlist coordinator in 2013, and to waitlist and tenant selection manager in 2017, the title she still held on the morning she was arrested. Her final salary was $67,400 a year. Her 2019 performance review described her as the institutional memory of this office. Her 2021 review used the word indispensable. Her 2022 review noted that she had not taken her full allotment of paid leave in any of the previous 4 years. The reviewer recommended a merit increase. The board approved it unanimously. The Riverton Housing Authority manages 2,840 units of federally subsidized housing across 19 properties, plus a Section 8 voucher program serving roughly 4,000 additional households. As of the year of the arrest, the waiting list for a federally subsidized one-bedroom apartment in Riverton was 8,400 names long. The average wait from application to keys was 4 years and 7 months. For a 3-bedroom unit, it was 6 years and 2 months. For an accessible ground floor unit suitable for a wheelchair user, applicants in 2021 were still being placed who had filed their first application in 2014. The list is the entire system. Everything else, the inspections, the income recertifications, the maintenance work orders, the lease enforcement, exists downstream of one ordered queue. The principle is simple and old. Need and time, not money, decide who lives where. An applicant's date of application, family composition, household income, and a small number of statutory preferences, veterans, victims of domestic violence, families displaced by code enforcement action, determine her position. Once placed, she waits. When a unit opens, the authority moves down the list in order, calls the next eligible household, schedules an inspection, and offers the lease. The manager of that list does 3 things. She maintains the records, paper and electronic, that establish each applicant's position. She processes the annual updates that keep applicants active, because an applicant who misses a recertification falls off the list and must reapply at the back. And she handles the placement match, the decision of which open unit goes to which next eligible name. Most of this is procedural. A small portion of it is discretionary, judgment calls about whether a particular unit suits a particular household, whether a preference applies, whether a paperwork irregularity warrants a hold or a denial. That small portion is where Denise Akoto worked. The Riverton Housing Authority had not converted its waiting list to a single audited database until 2018, and even then, the paper binders remained the legal record of every change. When a position was updated, the paper file was updated by hand, and the electronic record was updated separately. The 2 records were supposed to match. There was no automatic check. The annual audit, conducted by an outside firm, sampled 20 applications a year out of more than 8,000, a 0.25% review. The agency had been understaffed since a 2014 hiring freeze. The waitlist manager's position was the only one with full administrative access to both the paper binders and the electronic record. The position had no peer reviewer. The director of operations, who in principle supervised her, had not personally pulled a file in 9 years. The board had not requested a unit-by-unit reconciliation of the waitlist in over a decade. The system was built to assume that the person who held the keys to the queue would never have a reason to misuse them. The locks, the procedures, the audits, every safeguard rested on a single premise. Whoever managed the list believed in the principle the list existed to enforce, and Denise Akoto had for 14 years, by every measurable standard, behaved as if she did. The first known transaction took place on February the 7th, 2019. The applicant was a 31-year-old woman named Janelle Forster, who had applied for a 2-bedroom unit in May of 2017. Her position on the list, on the morning of February the 7th, was number 1,248. Standard processing time at her position was roughly 3.5 more years. That afternoon, a cash deposit of $4,000 was made into Denise Akoto's personal checking account at a credit union branch 6 blocks from the Housing Authority office. The deposit was made in 4 separate envelopes of $1,000 each, structured below the federal reporting threshold, but well above what a waitlist manager's paycheck would explain. 11 days later, Janelle Forster's position on the electronic waitlist was updated to number 41. Her paper file, separately, was annotated with a note in Denise Akoto's handwriting reading, "Preference verified. Displacement by code enforcement. See attached." The attachment was a single page on letterhead from a property the Housing Authority did not regulate, signed by a name that did not correspond to any city employee. 6 weeks after the position change, Janelle Forster was offered a 2-bedroom unit on Park Lane Court. She signed the lease, paid her first month's rent, and moved in on April the 3rd. The method, once it began, did not require imagination. It required only the willingness to use a position that no one else was watching. There were 3 patterns. The first was the leapfrog, the most common, in which an applicant who had paid was simply moved up the list by hundreds or thousands of positions, with a handwritten paper note retroactively documenting a preference that did not exist. The second was the substitution, in which a unit that had been offered to the next eligible household was withdrawn. The household informed that the unit had failed inspection, and the unit then offered to a paying applicant lower on the list. The third, used sparingly, was the manufactured opening, in which an existing tenant in a desirable unit was flagged for a recertification review. The tenant did not realize had been triggered, missed the deadline, was dropped from the active rolls, and the unit then reassigned to a paying applicant who had been routed around the standard queue entirely. The applicants she chose were carefully selected. They were the second-shift workers, the home care aides, the women cleaning the same offices Denise's mother had cleaned 30 years before, the men driving for delivery apps with 2 children at home, families who had saved or borrowed or pooled with relatives to put together $4,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 in cash because waiting another 4 years felt impossible. They were also, almost without exception, applicants whose paperwork showed past contact with public agencies in ways that made them unlikely to file a formal complaint. Recent immigrants without citizenship, mothers with open child welfare files, men with old felony records, people who had every reason to believe that complaining about a bribe they had paid would cost them more than the apartment was worth. The going rate, established sometime in 2019 and stable across the 4 years of the scheme, ran between $4,000 and $12,000, depending on unit size and how many positions the applicant needed to skip. 3-bedroom units in the desirable East Park complex topped the price list at $16,000. A single-room senior unit could be bought for as little as $2,500. Payment was always in cash, always handed over outside the Housing Authority office, usually in the parking lot of a discount grocery store on Custis Street, sometimes inside Denise's car. In 4 years, by the investigator's eventual count, she sold 43 placements. The total taken in cash, across that period, was approximately $684,000. She used the money the way a person who has not previously had money uses money. She paid off the remaining balance on her mortgage in 2 large transfers in 2020 and 2021. She remodeled the kitchen and the downstairs bathroom of the townhouse on Magnolia Street. Contractors paid partially in cash, partially in checks drawn on the same checking account that received the deposits. She put a new roof on her mother's house. She bought a used 2019 Acura sedan, financed conventionally to avoid attention, and paid the loan down aggressively. She moved her daughter from Riverton South High School to a private day school in Towson that cost $18,000 a year. None of it, taken individually, looked like the spending of a person committing a crime. Taken together, against a salary that was capped by union contract and visible to anyone who cared to look, it was the spending of someone who could no longer remember what she was supposed to be able to afford. If you are still with me, that means you understand why this case sits differently than the usual money and greed story. A public housing waitlist is not a luxury market. It is a queue of people who have already proven, on paper, that they cannot afford the open market. Selling the front of that line is not theft from the city. It is theft from the families who could not pay. If that distinction matters to you, hit subscribe. We cover cases the local news does not stay with. The applicant who finally broke the scheme was a 54-year-old home care aide named Patricia Hawkins. She had applied for a 2-bedroom unit in March of 2018 after a stroke left her unable to climb the stairs to the 3rd-floor walk-up where she had lived for 19 years and where the landlord refused to install a chairlift. She was caring, at the time, for 2 grandchildren whose mother was in a residential drug treatment program. Her position on the wait list, as of the autumn of 2022, was number 73. Number 73 was supposed to mean a unit within months. By the spring of 2023, Patricia Hawkins had been on the list 4.5 years, and her position had not moved. She did what most applicants in her situation do not do, which is to ask. She called the housing authority on a Tuesday morning in May of 2023 and asked to speak to whoever managed her file. She was routed, after 2 transfers, to a junior caseworker who pulled up her record on the electronic system. The caseworker, reading from the screen, gave Patricia Hawkins the information that detonated the case. Her position, the caseworker said, was number 218. Patricia Hawkins, who had not received any correspondence indicating a change, asked the caseworker to read her the names directly above and below her on the list. The caseworker, who did not realize she was not supposed to, did. Patricia Hawkins recognized one of the names. It was the name of a woman who lived 2 doors down from her grandchildren's mother. That woman had moved to a Riverton Housing Authority unit 3 months earlier. She had been on the list, according to Neighborhood Conversation, for less than 10 months. Patricia Hawkins did not file a complaint that day. She is the kind of person, the prosecutors would later note, who does not file complaints lightly. What she did was call her son, a 40-year-old maintenance supervisor at a community college, and ask him to come by. Her son called a cousin who worked as a paralegal at a downtown firm. The paralegal made one phone call to a college friend who had taken a position the previous year as a junior investigator at the Maryland office of the State Inspector General. The investigator's name was Sandra Liu. She was 31 years old, had been in the office for 14 months, and had inherited an open case file marked Riverton Housing Authority, Administrative Anomalies, Unsubstantiated, Pending Closure. The file had been opened the previous spring after an outside auditor flagged 7 waitlist positions that could not be reconciled between the paper and electronic records. The case had stalled because no specific complainant could be identified. Patricia Hawkins's name, written in pencil at the top of an intake form on a Thursday afternoon in May of 2023, gave Sandra Liu a complainant, a documented position change, a named beneficiary, and a starting point. Sandra Liu opened the formal investigation on Monday, the 22nd of May. By the following Friday, she had subpoenaed Denise Akoto's bank records. The bank records came back in 9 days. 3 years of monthly statements from the credit union branch 6 blocks from Denise Akoto's office showed a pattern that did not require a forensic accountant to interpret. Cash deposits, almost always in even $1,000 increments, almost always structured into multiple envelopes on the same day or on consecutive days, almost always concentrated in clusters of 3 to 5 deposits within a single week, followed by gaps of 2 to 6 weeks, followed by another cluster. Across the 3 years pulled, the deposits totaled $491,000. Sandra Liu pulled the previous 2 years on a follow-up subpoena. They added another $193,000. The total, $684,000 in cash deposits over 4 years, against a documented annual salary of $67,400, was the entire case in a single number. But the case required matching the deposits to the placements, which required the records Patricia Hawkins's complaint had given Sandra Liu the legal authority to obtain. On June the 15th, the state subpoenaed the full Riverton Housing Authority waitlist records, paper and electronic, for the period January 2019 through May 2023. The records were delivered on June the 23rd in 17 bankers' boxes. 3 contract auditors and 2 state forensic analysts spent 11 weeks on them. The pattern they reconstructed was 43 discrete placement events in which an applicant's position on the wait list jumped by more than 200 positions in a single update, with no corresponding documentation justifying the jump that could be verified against any external record. In 39 of the 43 cases, a cash deposit of between $2,500 and $16,000 had been made to Denise Akoto's checking account within 14 days prior to the position change. In the remaining 4 cases, the deposit had been made within 21 days after the change, which the prosecutors later interpreted as installment or follow-up payment. The smoking gun was a single page from the paper binder for the second quarter of 2020. It documented the position change for an applicant who, in the electronic system, jumped from number 2,104 to number 91 in a single update dated April the 8th, 2020. The paper note, in Denise Akoto's handwriting, read, "Preference verified, displacement by code enforcement action, file copy attached." There was no file copy attached. There had never been a file copy attached. The applicant in question had never been subject to any code enforcement action of any kind, and the position change had been entered into the electronic system on April the 8th at 3:27 in the afternoon, 11 minutes after the credit union opened its branch 6 blocks away and processed a $6,000 cash deposit into Denise Akoto's account in 3 $2,000 envelopes. The investigators interviewed 26 of the 43 placed applicants. 17 denied any knowledge of any payment. 6 confirmed they had paid, identified Denise Akoto by photograph and by full name, and gave dates, amounts, and locations that aligned with the bank deposits. 3 agreed to cooperate as state witnesses in exchange for immunity from prosecution on the bribery counts. One of the cooperators provided text messages that had been exchanged with Denise Akoto over a personal phone number not registered to any official account. Applicant, March 11th, 2021. "Is this Ms. Akoto? Cousin gave me this number, said you might be able to help with my application." Denise Akoto, March 11th, 2021. "Depends what you need and what you can do." Applicant, March 11th, 2021. 2-bedroom for me and the boys. Been waiting since 2019. Don't know how much longer I can do these stairs. Denise Akoto, March 12th, 2021. For a 2-bedroom in East Park, we're looking at 12. Cash. Nothing on paper. Nothing on text after this one. Applicant, March 12th, 2021. I can do 8 by Friday, maybe 10 by end of month. Denise Akoto, March 12th, 2021. 10 gets you on a list. 12 gets you placed by June. Your call. The total accounting, finished by the 11th week, was the document that prompted the arrest. 43 placements sold, 81 displaced applicants identified by name in the rolling impact analysis, their average wait extended by an additional 2 years and 4 months as a direct result of the position changes, $684,000 in cash deposits, 1 4-bedroom remodel, 1 paid-off mortgage, 1 private school tuition, 1 used Acura, 1 resurfaced roof on Pulaski Avenue, and a list of 43 apartments that, by every documented principle the housing authority operated under, should have gone to other people. The arrest was scheduled for the morning of October the 2nd, 2023, at the Riverton Housing Authority main office on Custis Street. Sandra Liu had requested that it be done at her workplace, with state investigators and uniformed officers present, in part because of the symbolism, and in part because the office would need to be secured immediately for the record seizure. Denise Akoto arrived at the building at 7:53 in the morning. She parked in her assigned space, retrieved a paper coffee cup from her car's center console, walked through the employee entrance using her badge, said good morning to the night security officer who was finishing his shift, and was at her desk by 8:03. She was wearing a charcoal pantsuit, a coral blouse, the small gold cross necklace she wore most days, and reading glasses pushed up on top of her head. She turned on her monitor, opened the electronic waitlist, and began reviewing a recertification queue. 2 state investigators and 3 uniformed Riverton police officers entered the office at 8:26. The lead investigator, Detective Raymond Castillo of the State Office of the Inspector General, walked directly to her cubicle. "Denise Akoto?" "Yes. May I help you?" "Ma'am, I'm Detective Castillo with the Maryland Office of the Inspector General. I have a warrant for your arrest. The charges are bribery, fraud, and official misconduct. I also have a warrant to seize the contents of this office. I need you to stand up, step away from the keyboard, and place your hands where I can see them. There's some sort of misunderstanding. I have a recertification deadline today. Ma'am, stand up, please. Hands on the desk. Can I see the warrant?" "Yes. After you stand up." She stood up. She placed her hands flat on the desk. She did not, the body cam footage shows, look surprised. She looked, more than anything, tired. Her shoulders dropped a 1/4 inch. She closed her eyes for a count of 2. When she opened them, she was looking at the framed photograph of her daughter, taped to the corner of her monitor. She did not speak again until she had been escorted out of the building and placed in the back of a state vehicle in the parking lot. At that point, she asked quietly whether she was allowed to call her mother. Detective Castillo told her she would have the opportunity to make a phone call after processing. She did not, at any point during the arrest, the transport, or the booking, ask what evidence the state had. She did not deny the charges. She did not justify them. She did not invoke her right to counsel until she was asked, formally, during processing, whether she wished to make a statement. At that point, she said, in a voice that the booking officer's audio later captured as almost inaudible, "I would like to speak with an attorney before answering any questions." She did not speak again, on the record, that day. She was charged by indictment of the state grand jury for Riverton County on October the 11th, 2023, with 43 counts of solicitation of a bribe, 43 counts of receipt of a bribe, 81 counts of fraud against the Riverton Housing Authority, 1 count per displaced applicant, and a single overarching count of official misconduct under Maryland Criminal Law Article Section 9-301. The total carry, if all counts ran consecutively, exceeded 90 years. The state, in pretrial filings, indicated it would pursue concurrent terms in the range of 15 to 20 years on the principal counts. Her bail was set at $500,000 cash or 1/10 surety. The Acura was forfeited. The Magnolia Street townhouse was subject to a Ellis pendens filing within 72 hours of the arrest, pending civil forfeiture proceedings. The credit union safe deposit box was opened on a warrant and found to contain $41,300 in banded cash and a small leather notebook in which Denise Akoto had recorded, in pencil, the first initials and last names of paying applicants alongside the amount paid and the date of placement. The notebook was the second smoking gun. It had not been needed. Her defense attorney, William Thackeray, a former public defender now in private practice in downtown Baltimore, filed a motion to suppress the bank records on the grounds that the initial subpoena had been issued on insufficient predicate. The motion was denied. He filed a motion to suppress the notebook on the grounds that the safe deposit warrant had not specified the notebook by name. That motion was also denied. He requested, in October of 2024, a continuance to allow for plea negotiations. The continuance was granted. The trial, as of the date this case was reviewed, has not yet begun. The state has not yet entered into a final plea agreement. Denise Akoto remains out on bail, lives with her mother on Pulaski Avenue, has been suspended without pay by the Riverton Housing Authority, and has surrendered her passport. Her daughter has finished out the academic year at the Towson Private School on a scholarship the school quietly created, and is now enrolled at Riverton South High School, where her mother graduated in 1994. The 81 displaced applicants identified by the state's audit have, as a class, been the subject of a separate administrative remediation process. The Riverton Housing Authority has agreed, under a consent decree with the state, to fast-track those 81 applicants ahead of the existing list to a position commensurate with the position they would have held had the manipulations not occurred. The decree does not return the years they spent waiting. 13 of the 81 have since died, in 3 cases of conditions directly worsened by the housing they remained trapped in. Their estates are not eligible for the fast track. Patricia Hawkins, the home care aide whose phone call to the Housing Authority on a Tuesday morning in May of 2023 set the investigation in motion, was offered a ground-floor 2-bedroom unit in the East Park complex on March the 17th, 2024. She moved in on April the 9th. Her grandchildren's mother, having completed treatment, now lives with them. Patricia Hawkins gave a single brief statement to a local newspaper reporter on the day she received her keys. "It should not have taken what it took," she said. "There were people in front of me on that list who should have been in this apartment a long time before I was. Some of them are gone now. I will think about that every time I unlock this door." The judge who will preside at trial, Magistrate Eleanor Quinn of the Riverton County Circuit Court, made a single statement during a bail review hearing in November of 2023 that has been quoted in every subsequent filing. "The defendant is presumed innocent," she said. "That presumption is the foundation of this proceeding and will be honored. I note, however, for the record, that the position the defendant held was a position of public trust in the narrowest and most literal sense. The waiting list she managed was not a convenience. For thousands of families in this jurisdiction, that list was the only available path to housing they could afford. The state alleges that the defendant sold the order of that list. If those allegations are proved at trial, the sentence must reflect not only the dollar amount taken, but the years of additional waiting imposed on people who did not have years to spare. I will hear arguments at sentencing. I expect them to be specific. The case against Denise Akoto is pending. The trial date, as of this writing, has been continued twice. The 81 displaced families are, in differing measures, being moved forward. The 43 applicants who paid will not be prosecuted. They are listed in the indictment only as witnesses. The credit union has closed her account. The Housing Authority has, under public pressure, reorganized the waitlist management function so that no single employee holds the access she held. The annual outside audit will now sample 200 applications, not 20. None of that gives back the years. A waiting list is supposed to be the answer that need, not money, gives. For 4 years, in a small office on Custis Street, in a port city that had been losing jobs since 1976, that principle had a price, and the price was paid by the people who could least afford to pay it. That case will sit with me for a long time. But the next one on the right-hand side is one I still cannot explain, and I want to hear what you make of it.